Hello, and welcome back to the Care Advocates, where we're advocating for you. Today, we're talking about Dr. George Ackerman's new book, Voices of Resilience. Welcome back to the Care Advocates. I am your co-host, Lance A. Slatton. I'm also the host of All Home Care Matters and the co-host of the Caregivers Journal and Conscious Caregiving with L&L. I'm here with my distinguished friend and co-host, Dr. George Ackerman, also known as Sharon's son, George. Welcome, George. How are you today?
Good. I just want to let the audience know how amazing you are and all the things you do. And I don't feel that I would be really able to get through some of the tougher days without a friend like you and this entire caregiving community. Unfortunately, last week, Saturday, would have been my mother's birthday. We lost her due to Parkinson's. And as you know, as well as you do, I've dedicated my life to advocacy. But very important to keep stressing that our show together is going to focus on all diseases, all illnesses, and all caregivers, not specifically just Parkinson's, although I love the Parkinson's community. I find it very important to share our journeys and others, and that's hopefully what we'll be discussing today because everyone has a different journey, but we all are brought together for the same purpose, and that's making sure no one ever feels alone.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said that better, George. You know, the show, the Care Advocates that you and I discussed about creating, we've created it, and here we are, and we're only into our third recording now. And when I was thinking earlier about what should the topic be today, I thought no better topic than your new book. It's just a coincidence that it just recently came out. And it's, Voices of Resilience. You were joking, I have the collector's edition because this is the full book. It's over 560 pages of important information. But then you re-released it promptly with two-part books where you separated them into two different books. So it's not as, heavy to digest. But I really wanted to talk about the book because this isn't a book like, a son's journey that you also wrote, in memory of your story and of your mother, Sharon. But this book, you've talked to countless people. I don't admittedly know exactly how many interviews are within this book, but I've been reading different interviews. Full disclosure, I'm also in the book. But this book is really all about advocates. Every interview in here is an advocate from different backgrounds, different situations. Tell us about, first, how do you identify the people that you interview? What's
Yeah,
what's your barometer?
yeah. I mean, my mother passed on 1/1/2020, and for 2 years it was all about my mother and my story. And then I found out, which I was kind of shocked. And again, this goes back a little to Parkinson's, but really every illness out there and disease. I was shocked that I thought there were about 1 million people in the U.S. with Parkinson's, and then I found out globally it was 10 million, and my heart kind of stopped again. It felt like a part of me passed away or something tragic when I realized there's so many people battling all these diseases. And that's when I decided to go on a second kind of mission, and that's to share other individuals' journeys. As of today, sitting here, it's now October 2024. I've interviewed 1,000 people around the world from England, France, Spain, Italy. These diseases do not discriminate, unfortunately. And I then, a few years after that, leading to just a year ago, about 2023, I decided to expand on not just Parkinson's, but on other illnesses and other caregivers. And that's really why I'm so proud and honored to be a part of the advocate show that we have, the caregiver, because it's we really all, I feel, have to be a family in all these fights. Just one of us alone might be a voice, but together I feel our voices are so much stronger. And that's what this book came really out of, a passion to really show a spotlight and shed light on other people's journeys. That's what I did. I selected the first 200. Unfortunately, as you see, the book was so large, costly. I didn't want people. I mean, I would offer all this for completely free, which we donate everything to organizations like Michael J. Fox Foundation. So I get nothing except gratification that no one ever is alone. And that's really what the mission is today.
Yeah. When you were compiling these interviews, and I don't know, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Did you find yourself kind of rereading them when you were putting the book together?
Yeah, there are tough days for everyone, including myself. Just again, last week, my mother would have had her birthday, and now the holidays are coming for every caregiver out there and those diagnosed. It's not easy. When I find those tough days or my own medical issues, even now I'm very honest, as you know, the listeners, right now I'm sitting with a giant thing of ice on my back and kind of a brace, which might be permanent. I had 4 back surgeries, and I wish I had never done them. It's too late now. So I move forward. But on my tough days, I look to these journals and these interviews like yours to inspire me to keep fighting. And I mean, specifically, again, as you mentioned, you're in the book. There's a reason. It's not just because we know each other or we might be close.
Because we didn't know each other at the time. We didn't.
And yeah, what I actually knew about your All Home Care Matters like 4 years before we even knew each other. It was more of like a social media. I followed you. I didn't even know it was you. I thought it was just a big, and it is a big organization, but I never knew, Lance was in the organization, Dementia TLC too. When I was looking for support, I felt alone. I just looked on social media and somehow I found your organization. And I felt that that was one that had to be in the book because it emphasizes that you're not alone, but that there are people out there who might have gone through what you are. We've come out the other side, and although I lost my mother, I've made such incredible relationships, and all the individuals in these books mean the world to me, and I consider them family today.
And I think that's so well said, George. And, I fully agree. We've become very good friends, close friends. And, I look at, the advocacy that you're doing and people that may or may not know, if they don't know, all you have to do is go on social media and immediately Together for Sharon or Together for Sharon #2, it's everywhere. And, you do all of the work you do in memory of your mother. But I also think, maybe it's fair to say you're also doing it to support other Georges and Lances that are out there who, they're not doing what we're doing now. They're doing what we did, back with our parents, trying to help them and be that family caregiver. And this book, I feel like is almost like in a biblical sense, like a Bible, because not to compare it to the Bible, of course, but it's a Bible for caregivers to get inspiration. Because for me, when I was going through it, no one ever mentioned the word caregiver to me or family caregiver, and I certainly didn't identify as one. I was pursuing medical school. My father had multiple surgeries, lived with my wife and I as newlyweds for, over 2 years. But we were never given a resource. We were never handed a book like, Voices of Resilience. We were never given a book like the All Home Care Matters Official Family Caregivers Guide. I wrote my book because I wanted to write it to me all those years ago and what I wish I had to help support me through those difficult times, to make me aware of the different resources and support networks that are out there, because none of that was handed to me. And with our company, we deal with countless families daily, and it hasn't changed much, George. These families still are not given the resources, and very few families are even shared, that home care is an option if you're still trying to work full time, or maybe you're raising your family still. How do you work full time, raise your family, and be a full time caregiver for a parent, let alone one that doesn't even live in the same home as you? We had my father move in with us, so that minimized a little bit of it, but it didn't minimize the care. If anything, it created more care because now we're right there if he needs something, and we did it joyfully and would never change a thing. But what happens to all these caregivers who maybe live in Ohio and their parent lives in Indiana, or, Florida, and they live in Georgia, and maybe they don't have the ability to move them in? So now they're a long distance caregiver, which creates a whole other complex set of issues. And so these interviews that you've compiled in this book, of the countless hundreds of interviews that you've done, and you've taken the 200 that you wanted in the book, I feel like there's something to learn from each one of the interviews. Everybody's situation is different. You might have 20 caregivers across the country taking care of their parent with Parkinson's, but each situation may be different. The dynamics may be different, or maybe it's not Parkinson's, maybe it's dementia, maybe it's hopefully, something not awful, but it's a bad illness or a terminal illness. they need that support as much as their loved one does, because, if they don't have the ability to hire private home care or hire a household employee or pay for assisted living or memory care, because, those things Medicare and private health insurance don't pay for. That's out of pocket. So where's the support for them? And they feel lost and overwhelmed, like what you and I went through. Share with me, if you would, George, what would be your top 3 interviews that really personally had a profound impact on you that, you had conducted over the past several years?
Yeah, the nice thing is that all the interviews also give information how you can contact the person. So you literally don't need me anymore. It's in a way, because that's not really, again, I don't want anything. I don't want the money. I just want people to be aware. I can't say 1 or 2 or 3 are the best. They're all kind of the same, not same, but so unique. Everyone's different. One that kind of makes me smile, though, is a friend of mine now. His name is Phil Jerky, and he's actually has Parkinson's. He's in England, but he's a comedian. So he
Oh,
actually does stand-up comedy. And a lot of the things that I look for is unique individuals like yourself, but I want people who kind of inspire me too, because I do need that kind of pick-me-up some days when I'm drained or worked a lot or my own issues with family still, or, tough times. But when I see these individuals like Phil, and I get to know him, he's been on my show too. It's just beautiful to be able to kind of reach virtually around the world too. Imagine being able to speak to someone in England from the US. I'm in Florida, and things like that. Just incredible the way the technology today is done, even us talking now. And then it just kind of moves. And here you can see, here's another gentleman. His name's David. I don't know I'll probably send you also a photo, but David Abramson, he actually has raised money. He lost his father due to Parkinson's, but 4 years ago, he started an organization to raise funds for research to find a cure. And he's raised, here he's holding a check for $30,000. So these people are incredible to me. They're out there fighting. They might have lost a loved one like myself, but we don't kind of close the door and move on, because that's not what this is about. We keep fighting until there's a cure. Another person who's become kind of like family, her story is actually going to be in a future book, but Michelle Lane at the Davis Finney Foundation. I'll send you that. But she's also another individual. She started walking. It's called Louisiana Walk. So for Parkinson's awareness, and a lot of individuals are really affected and they're changed their lives. She also, some individuals like Michelle have Parkinson's. So it's not just the caregiver. Some people are caregivers and also diagnosed. So it's a very interesting field and world, and it's just so many journeys. I always say the only journey that breaks my heart today is the one that I'm not aware of.
right. And I think that's so poignant, because, we're trying to give voice to the voiceless. We're trying to find those that are not found. And, I feel like that was kind of our situation with my father. I had clinical and healthcare background. I was pursuing medical school, but caregiving is not something that's really discussed in the academic world, right? It's not looked at, even Medicare for like billing purposes. We have a home care company. Medicare recognizes that as non-skilled care, and home health care is looked at as skilled care. I would love for them to change the label, because it's only for billing purposes, not for the actual skill or lack thereof. But there's a ton of skill involved in home care. Our staff will take blood pressures. They'll check, glucose. We've had a couple of clients over the just last 2 years who were having an active stroke while our staff was there. Our staff recognized the signs and the symptoms and immediately initiate 911. And 911 was able to get to our client quick enough to reverse the effects of the stroke and save that person's life, or save some type of paralysis or long-term issue. There's a lot of skill there, right? But so people always get it confused. Oh, non-skilled, it must be a lay person. They must not identify, and that's anything but the case. It's just unfortunate that, nationally, from academics to the healthcare system, that far too few people really identify what family caregivers go through. And that's why, you're doing what you're doing, I'm doing what we do, and we're doing this together to help advocate and make people aware of the support and that they're not alone. And hopefully we do find those that we're not aware of. When you were going through with your mom, George, and you look back, because it's always it's an emotional time, it's a physically draining time, it's just mentally exhausting, and it's unlike anything I think people will ever have to face, right? And when you look back, knowing what you know now, what kind of resources would you have wished you knew about back then that maybe you weren't aware of?
Yeah, there's a lot of local community support. I don't think I would have honestly done anything different. The only thing I would have done is had my mother meet people who have Parkinson's, because she never met anyone. I didn't realize just a month ago, for some reason, it kind of popped in my head that I never met someone with Parkinson's, and she didn't either. So I think that would have changed a lot. Obviously, it wouldn't have still had her with us today. We need a cure, but I think she would have liked the fact that knowing that she's not the only person in the world. Because when you go through something like that, you feel like you only have hope, and when hope's lost, you have nothing left. So I think if we did bring someone from an organization, but it's kind of too late at that point. But I wish that togetherforsharon.com was there, because of so many resources. It's kind of getting too big. I don't want people to get lost in the site, but it's a lot of things happening. Just last week, famous NFL player Brett Favre announced he has Parkinson's. So the week before that, we haven't spoken on the show, but Ryan Reynolds kind of came out and discussed Parkinson. But the worst part for their family and his father was the hallucinations and delusions, which is not spoken about a lot. A lot of people with Parkinson's do not have that, but my mother unfortunately did. So it's now becoming, and also the month before, President Biden in the discussion, not about politics, but whether or not he had Parkinson's and all, it brings the national attention that's kind of needed for Parkinson's awareness, or any disease. And also the month before that, the National Plan to End Parkinson's Disease passed through Congress and became law. I'm not sure at this point now, 2 or 3 months later, what the progress is, because once you pass it, doesn't mean anything. You have to implement it. So it's a lot of good, interesting things coming, but I wish all these things had been there when my mother was around, because we needed more support. We didn't have the care that we needed to. We went through about 10 organizations and over 70 different, I don't know what to call them. They're not really caregivers, but females who came in. And my goal was that my mother didn't fall, that they weren't trained with Parkinson's. So it was some of the stories we'll get into, I hope. I mean, just one is one person we hired to watch my mother and make sure she was safe brought her to shopping with her for her own things. like some of the stories are almost like horror. We could have a whole Halloween horror caregiving show,
Yep.
maybe, because it's just what did I learn? That you really can't train to be a caregiver. You're kind of just tossed into it. You just have to do your best. Like you mentioned, there's so much. It's almost like you're juggling a circus. All these things from your loved ones, feelings, your loved ones care, your own health, your family, your work. It's a massive undertaking, but you will come through at the end. Unfortunately, again, my mother is no longer with us, which is kind of haunting. Even oddly timing in October, but I wish that was the only thing I do, regret that we didn't have a cure in time.
Yeah, and I know, like yourself, we both have young families. We have wives, and another aspect of the caregiving, I think, that kind of gets lost with family caregivers is you also have other responsibilities outside of a job and caring for your loved one. You have they're usually, like in your situation, mine. You have the grandchildren now. My daughter was the only one born at the time of my dad's passing, but she was 2. She knew grandpa, but now, she doesn't remember because she was only 2 at the time. Having kids understand, I know with us, a lot of times when we're meeting with families and their loved one has dementia, they'll say, I don't really know anything about dementia. And that goes back to getting the support, resources, education from your healthcare providers. But then you have the grandchildren wanting to know, well, why is grandma doing that? What's wrong with grandma? Or if, hopefully it never happens to someone, but it does. Grandma snapped at me. She yelled at me. Grandma doesn't know my name, and you already have an issue with the family being able to understand the disease and what's going on. But now you have the young children that are seeing this and around it, how and being able to explain it to them properly and appropriately so that they don't feel like, grandma or grandpa's upset with them. I just feel like, going back to the advocacy, we need our healthcare providers to provide better support for the family caregivers. Just like during COVID, George, I called our staff like the frontline heroes because, yeah, the front line was really, your emergency room and, but you can go one step further and saying, the home care and home health care were helping to keep those people safe in their home so that they didn't end up having to go to an emergency room, and it played such an integral part during the whole pandemic. And now it's almost like it's a forgotten aspect, and I just feel like, the advocacy for our family caregivers and for our frontline workers needs to be there because it's such an important part. If you weren't there for your mom, what would have happened? If I wasn't there for my dad, he was going to go into a facility, and we need to support the family caregivers through the awareness and advocacy of what they're going through and what they're dealing with.
Yeah, I think we could have a whole show on children because I'm actually writing a book now on, explaining. I think we have an identical situation where my youngest two, he was two at the time, Eli, and he doesn't really remember my mother. So thankfully, with Together for Sharon and all the work we do, she is remembered and he'll remember her, but it's not the same. And they don't understand even now. My daughter turned, my oldest, Brooke, 12 just the other day, and she had a birthday like 2 days from my mother, and we all used to celebrate everyone together. But the other day was the first time because she's growing. She started asking more about her. She remembers her, but she doesn't understand Parkinson. They even ask, "Can you catch it like a cold?" So it's I like when they ask because you have to be able to speak and be honest. So maybe one day we'll have an entire show. I like even one for children, another one for spouses, and this is and I would be able to sit here today with you and not falling apart if it wasn't for my wife who's holding down the fort as we speak, working. So it's this, you have to have these diseases, all of them don't just affect the individual diagnosis. It also affects the family and the community, and really the world. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. That's why we're advocating. It's not just about people doing what they can on their own. You got to come together, and everyone listening got to support one another. Just a little simple email thanking someone or telling them how much they mean changes the world. You might have one negative out of the million, but those million positive are the ones that really mean the world. I just published a blog this month on the negative dark side of social media, which is funny because it happened to be Halloween, one of my favorite holidays or celebration. But there's always tough stuff, but you can get through the tough if you have positive support with one another.
Absolutely. Well, last question, and then we'll go, George. It'll be in the show notes and on the screen, but why don't you, for people that might not be watching and they're only listening to this, where would you like them to go to learn more or to purchase the book?
Sure, please support all that Lance does as well at All Home Care Matters. For the book, you can go to Together for Sharon. It's all spelled out together, FORSHARON.com. And it literally says books now. We're always changing things. Now we have multiple books. I'm actually finishing a very big book coming next year on policing and Parkinson's. I have another one the year after, working on one on sports and progression. I mean, it's not that I want to write, it's just that these are things that aren't out there. And I'm shocked. Even the name of our show, Together, is something I haven't seen, which is shocking, because I think it should be a national TV live for the world because it's such important topics. Yes, we won't be like a wrestling federation and doing tantalizing topics or, gory things, but these topics are affecting every household, every person they'll likely affect us. So why not talk about it now before it might be kind of too late? So yeah, please reach out anytime. It's just me. I'm not a foundation. I'm just me. I'm a son who lost his best friend, his mother due to Parkinson, but today I advocate for all diseases and for all individuals in the fight. We send our love and support, but we really have to be a family in this battle to end all these diseases together.
Well said, George. Well, till the next episode of the Care Advocates, Dr. George Ackerman, Sharon's son George, our co-host, and myself, Lance A. Slatton, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you again next month.